Man, it's just forced so many people to kind of go inward. I think we talked about this, like, or, one of the things we were messaging about is just, or maybe I saw it on one of the Instagram live things, but just it's kind of pushed people to have to go inward and face a lot of things that maybe they wouldn't have had to have faced unless this pandemic happened. Yeah, it's been such an interesting year. I mean, obviously it's been an interesting year for absolutely everybody, and everyone's had such a united experience with it, and like everything else, such an individual experience with it.
Hey, there's a chick on my app.
Right, I'm just saying women aren't meant to fight. You have tiny, hollow bones.
Don't you think you're doing a lot of genderizing?
What?
Don't be a pussy. Join Cobra Kai.
I was a natural cobra.
Do you follow the holistic psychologist?
I do on my personal page.
Yeah, so she is one of my favorite people to follow, but she does this thing called future self journaling, and it's really, really impactful, and it's really all about neuroplasticity, and so I do it daily, and one of the things I write on there is, the question is, what behavior do you want to change? And then it says, what are you going to do to change this behavior? So when the old behavior comes up, you follow up with this new behavior pattern that or this new behavior that you're going to do. And so mine is, I'm a very positive thinker, but I want to think more positively. So I put, like this morning, I put, I want to think more positively. And when an old negative thought comes up, in that moment, I allow myself to think positively. And then you create an affirmation that's going to support that new behavior. So like for mine this morning, it was, I'm allowed to think positively. Like I'm allowed, it's something I'm allowed to do. I think most people are inclined to think negatively, one, because our brain is kind of set up that way. But I think a lot of people too have a difficult time being positive, because I think some people are scared. A lot of people have so much trauma and pain and have experienced so much difficult experiences that they get used to that. And so anything outside of that is very unfamiliar to the nervous system. So we tend to we get comfortable thinking negatively. Sorry, I went off on like a whole tangent.
No, you're good. You're good. I do have to introduce you though, because people have to know who you are.
Okay, go ahead.
But you're going to lead me right into the first point, which is nice. But I am here with Rachel Kove, and I'm very excited about it. As you can see, we just kind of jumped right into it with full steam ahead. But I mean, tell me a little bit about what you do, what your profession is, and because you do work with a lot of trauma patients as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working in the field of mental health, personal development, substance abuse disorders, compulsive behavioral pattern stuff for about 10 years. I started my own journey into the world of personal development and recovery about 14 years ago. I own a life coaching company that I'm actually in the process of leaving, and I'm starting another one. But that company is called Transformational Solutions, and it's an amazing company that helps a lot of people who struggle with drug addiction and substance abuse. And it's just, I actually started that company and I listen, how I operate, I'm very transparent. I just I'm human. I think people need vulnerability to feel normal. In the pandemic, I went through a divorce, and I started that company with my ex-husband. And so we have a kid. And so part of, my own individual journey of, surviving COVID, it's just been a lot of self-empowerment, self-love, and taking risks, and, facing a lot of fears. So we started that company 3 years ago. It's doing really, really well. And now I'm in the process of venturing out and starting another one. And I'm doing the WTF as a human experience with Shane Coyle. And I facilitate a lot of groups in outpatient facilities. I work with a lot of people individually. I work with couples. I work with families. And a lot of the people I do work with have experienced a lot of trauma. But to be honest with you, everyone has trauma. everyone has trauma. You know, I was talking about the holistic psychologist, and I love hearing her book, because her book is called How to Do the Work. And one of the things she says is everyone has trauma. I mean, there's so many definitions for it. One of the definitions is overwhelming stress on the body. So everyone has that. And I'm so like, I've experienced a lot of trauma in a lot of different ways. And I've also walked through to the other side of it. And I've been in a position where I was so stuck that I became completely addicted to alcohol and so many other types of compulsive behaviors, where I just felt so stuck. I had no self-worth. I had no self-esteem. I was in such fear, and I just couldn't propel forward in certain areas in my life. And then on the other side of it, I was also in somewhat high functioning because I was an athlete. I heard you say you're into sports.
Very, very into sports.
Me too. So I played soccer my whole life. I played tennis, I play everything. I love sports. So I was functioning in that way, but I really just love bringing consciousness into people's life. This idea of empowering individuals through living a conscious way of life, because I think connection is how people heal pain. And if we don't know how to connect with ourselves, we're not going to know how to connect with others. So really, like, I love to empower people to learn how to connect with themselves and others.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I have my own, obviously we all have trauma. I have my own stuff. Like you said, I love sports. And that has always been something that caused me to maybe not always get along perfectly with all the other girls growing up.
Oh man, me too. Gosh, what did you play?
So everything.
Yeah.
But by the time I had gotten to kind of middle school and high school, I'd kind of solidified some of the stuff I was doing. So I was really into martial arts. And that was thanks to the Karate Kid.
I love that.
So I had gotten my junior black belt in Kenpo because I was under 16. And I was working towards my black belt. Then I ended up stopping that to pursue varsity athletics because I was really getting good at cross country and track. And then my whole life, both my parents played basketball. I played basketball. The first sport I think I played was basketball. There's photos of me, dunking on the little baby hoop or whatever. And it's just the sport that like, I think brings me the most joy. Like it's been my outlet throughout the pandemic, is like me going outside and shooting hoops or whatever. And that one to me is special because, both my parents played. My dad coached me my whole life. Now I coach with my dad whenever I'm home. And it is the thing that has kept, I think, my dad and I together throughout some of our harder times. Is, when you're having a lot of struggles, like, being a strong-willed young girl dealing with your dad who wants to keep you a little bit more sheltered, and everything is coming from a place of love, but the two of us aren't understanding each other. It's like, oh, you could just go play basketball, and then you understand that we do connect on a certain level, and there is something there in our relationship that we want to work on. And so actually I think it's over the course of my whole life kept us together and kept us working on our relationship. So basketball is really special to me.
I love that. I mean, I had the same thing with my dad. I mean, my dad, that was one of the things that we connected on so deeply, was my love for sports. And, it was always, and I'm sure you can relate, I'm athletic. And I say this proudly because one of the things I love to teach people, and by the way, I don't think I actually formally answered the question. I'm a trauma-informed life coach. That's my title. But one of the things I like to coach people on is owning your gifts and owning your talents and being okay with them, because I think we live in a culture that says if you own what you're good at, then you're egotistical. And I'm not a believer in that. I think there's a difference between being humble and being self-confident. And so like I played soccer from the time I was 6 till I was 20. And I still I still, anytime I can get a ball and go play, like I do. It's like, for me, sports is it saved my life, honestly. Like soccer, if I did not have soccer, I don't know if I would have survived, because it was I had a lot of pain that I was struggling with for a very, very long time. And growing up, I was this young girl and I grew up in like the Spice Girl era. And it was very confusing though, because I was this tough, strong girl who beat all the boys in all the sports. And yet I also like loved Barbies. But I didn't feel like I fit in because I just had this love for like competition and challenge. And I was faster than the boys and I wanted to play baseball more than all the boys, and they would get intimidated by me. And I think their whole masculine identity got interrupted because I was better than them a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's never stopped for me. I don't know if when you were growing up, I mean, I know this was huge when I was going in elementary school, and it kind of stopped and faded out, I think, as I entered like high school. But we would do these like exams in gym where they would measure your athletic ability based on like a couple of series of tests. And if anybody here ever took the pacer test, if anyone's listening, it's like the one that beeps and you have to run to the other line and you have to get there before the beep. I was always the last person going, and all the guys would be going. And throughout elementary school, like there were 2 or 3 other guys who could keep pace with me in elementary school. Cause you are more on a physically even plane boy girl when you're in elementary school. And once you get to high school, sometimes like puberty takes over, and I know why guys are faster at running. Like it's all biology and things like that. So I could sit here and comfortably say, I know I'm not as fast as the guys anymore.
Yeah. Such a hit to the ego.
It sucks to say, but I mean, I would always be the last one going, and it would be me and this one kid, and he was like, I can't let you beat me. You're a girl. And I was like, what is the difference, dude? Like, if I beat you, it's because I have more endurance than you. It has nothing to do with our like, okay, I have boobs and you have a penis. Like, oops, sorry. Yeah. Oh, well.
Totally. I mean, gosh, honestly, I still get this. Like, I went to the park like a month ago or 2 months ago, and this guy, he was playing soccer, and I wanted to join him. I was like, hey, do you want to pass with me? And I felt his resistance because I was a woman. And it's very gratifying to me when, like, I remember growing up, I would play soccer. I would play often I would be like the only girl playing with a bunch of dudes. And I was better than all of them, but they didn't know that. Like, as soon as I like played, they were like, oh my God, oh shit. And then I would like I would dupe them like with the soccer ball. Right. And it became like this big thing, like, oh, like the girl got you. And I'm just like, shut up. But at the same time, it felt good. But I get that. Like, you feel like, what is the difference? I have the same love for this sport as you do. Why is it such a big deal if a woman can play? And I think a lot of men struggle with this. And again, like, I'm not the type of person to like villainize men and demonize men, but I often, and I'm sure you've experienced this, like, it's tough being a woman. It's tough being a tough woman.
Yeah.
And it's hard being a strong woman, because that is not, I think it's changing in our culture, obviously, but that's not been something that's been kind of accepted a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same experience as you with soccer. In basketball. Going to college, I obviously wasn't playing D1 at Syracuse. I do play on the club team, which has been great. Cool. It gives me a bunch of girls to play with as well, but I loved going to play pickup. And I actually really did. I found a great group of guys who included me in their group, and they're awesome. And I love playing with them. And some of them are my best friends. And so I ended up having a really good group. But when I first started going, I would walk in alone, and there would be no other girls there. And I would have to go and like kind of earn my stripes a little bit before anybody asked me to play, which I think is ridiculous, because then a guy walks in who you can see has no basketball skills, and he just gets to walk right into the game. And that it was definitely, it was sucky, but I got really fortunate in finding like 5 or 6 guys, all, in my group of friends that were very willing to.
I mean, I remember this is probably like, oh my God, that's crazy. That's so weird time. This is pre-COVID. So I went to this like indoor soccer field, And I was so excited. And I got there, I went with a girlfriend of mine, but we were the only two girls. None of the guys wanted us to be on their team. We started playing. They never passed me the ball. And they also made a comment that was like, I can't remember the exact thing they said, but it was like, they didn't want to play with us because I was a girl.
Yeah.
Right. And I hate that. Like it is such a fucking pet peeve of mine. It also motivates me to like beat them, but it's awful. Like it's awful. It's awful.
I'm loving that you're explaining my actual emotions. I mean, and the guys that I do play with and do now know me, they can see it on my face when someone says, "Oh, go guard the girl," or like, "Go do this," or "Oh, like the girl hit a shot." Like my face lights up. And there was one time my friend actually walked me out of the building. He was like, "I think you need to get some air. I think you need to breathe. Like, you need to calm down." And it just infuriates me. But I think it also translates into life. And so something that I've always struggled with now, being a young adult and stuff, is I think I struggle to feel feminine in my relationship sometimes too. And like, there is like an element of like being feminine that makes you feel like sexy. And I don't know that I always feel that. And I'm not made to feel that way in my brain. I don't know.
Oh my God. I just got the chills you bringing that up, because that part has been such a journey for me, becoming safe with my femininity, because my masculinity it served me very well in my life. It protected me in a lot of ways. And everyone has, or everyone needs to develop a healthy relationship with both the masculine side of ourselves and the feminine side of ourselves. And the masculine side is very doing. It's very goal oriented. It's very doing oriented. The feminine side is more of a relaxed, place. It's more of a receiving place, which is hard, especially like if in sports, it's such a doing, active, action-based thing, right? And I never felt safe being feminine. It's still part of my journey right now, is like really, actually, that's a huge part of what happened to me in this last year with COVID, was because we were kind of forced to not do so much and sit still. I was really forced to just lean into more in my feminine and learn to be comfortable in the receiving place, and learn to be okay with feeling sexy, be okay with leaning into like wearing pink. I mean, let me tell you, like wearing pink has not been an easy thing for me in my life. I felt very scared to be dainty. I mean, I think too, in our culture, like when I thought of the perfect woman, I always compared myself to like the princesses and, the dainty, sweet girls that didn't say anything and didn't have strong personalities. And that's what I thought a feminine woman was. And I think it's being redefined right now. And I get why you struggled, because it's a hard thing.
Yeah. It is not easy at all. And I do agree with you. I think like the times are changing, and I'm so glad that girls now get to grow up with role models. Whatever you think about the Wonder Woman movies or the new adaptations of Disney movies, they are giving women a stronger presence and a bigger role. Like I don't know if you saw the Aladdin remake, but I actually think that movie should be called Jasmine at this point. It is no longer about Aladdin. And I love it. I thought it was great. I was glad they gave her like her own storyline. She ended up being, the ruler, and it was very good. And if I had seen that instead of the original, granted, I love the original, but I think it would have maybe changed my perspective on what the princesses were and how they could act. And she was a badass, but she was also feminine. And so I think young girls now are going to get those role models that I was definitely searching for. And I think my generation. Like I'm 21, so I grew up with that era of like the Disney Channel, and Demi Lovato has been like this huge inspiration for I think a lot of people, and she's showing everybody. I think everyone's kind of going on a journey with her, and she's covering her vulnerability, her sexuality, her identity, her substance abuse struggles, all of these things, and she's been so open about all of it from a very young age. And so I grew up with her as, I think, a role model.
Well, that's beautiful. Actually, just so you know, I mean, I'm sure you've already noticed this already. I go off on so many different tangents, so keeping you focused is always a challenge. But I love that. I love that you're inspired by Demi Lovato. I think she's incredible, and I think we're normalizing so many different things now that were never okay to talk about. Like, speaking of sexuality, like that's never been something that's talked about. It's actually a huge passion of mine to start normalizing that discussion from a young age, because it needs to be talked about. It needs to be talked about where it's talked about in a respectful way, in a sacred way, in a way where people understand it and they're not confused by it. Because if you're confused by it, then you act out in negative ways that harm yourself and others. And that was my experience too. I mean, no one talked about this stuff growing up. No one talked about it in elementary school. No one talked about it in high school. And then you get to high school. My experience was people start acting out in really negative ways. You know, I mean, I was harmed sexually in high school. So it's like and again, like that's not okay, but also men and women are not taught like what are appropriate sexual boundaries. You're not taught these things. And again, I think it's changing, but again, I think it needs to be something that's talked about, and it's a scary subject because it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And there's actually this amazing woman. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, but if you don't, I highly encourage you to. Her Instagram handle, I think, is at Sex with Emily. She really is on this mission to just normalize the discussion of sex in a healthy, loving, respectful, kind, authentic way.
Yeah. I mean, and not just normalizing conversations about sex, but also like personal sexuality, I think, is becoming much more talked about, because I know every time I told a guy, like, I'm super into sports, I like, to watch football on Sundays, and I like to do this or that. And the first question out of his mouth would be, "Oh, so you're a lesbian?" And he would stop flirting with me. And I'd be like, "No, I'm not." But it's not, it wouldn't be a problem if I was, but also I'm not. And I'm standing here and I'm flirting with you. So what changed your mind? The fact that I would rather go play pickup basketball on a Friday afternoon than go to the mall? Yeah. That shouldn't justify anything to you. And that's not what sexuality is. Nope. And it's not defined in those terms. And I don't know that people understand that.
No. And it's such sexuality is so beautiful. I mean, Mother Nature is a creative, we're all sexual beings. We're born from being sexual. Like, it's a beautiful experience again, but most people don't understand it. And the conversation could be uncomfortable for a lot of people because it wasn't normalized growing up. It kind of was like this forbidden thing. Right. And I totally relate to that. I often had very, very similar experiences. And what it did was it made me feel very lonely and very isolated. And I very much disconnected from a lot of people. And my experience growing up with boys was so awful. Like, it was not an easy experience for me to date, to connect with boys, to flirt, because I had a very similar experience and I often was called aggressive. And I partially was aggressive because it was my nature. And again, like, the masculine energy is very aggressive. And so that kept me safe because I had a lot of trauma in very various ways. So I think you're doing such beautiful things right now, just like bringing up topics that need to be discussed so people aren't ashamed to be themselves, to talk about these things. I had so much relief when I just started to talk about things that I felt ashamed of, or I felt afraid to talk about, like masturbation or sexuality, or just like any fears that I had or insecurities. Like growing up, I felt like I was the weirdest person on the planet. And if you told me I was weird, I had suicidal ideations by the time I was 12 years old. And that's because part of that was because I was so afraid of what people thought of me, because I thought I was the weirdest person on the planet. And I felt so awkward in my skin. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about on here today, if that was stuff that was talked about at that age, I would not have been thinking about ending my life by the time I was 12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't 12, but I was in high school, and I just felt like I didn't matter to anybody because I was weird. I was the outlier of, I wasn't the girly girl. I wasn't the guy. I wasn't one of the boys either, as much as I wanted to be. And there was no place where I felt accepted. And then I didn't feel accepted in my own home.
That's
and
right.
There was a lot of issues going on there that we're now working through. And I think the pandemic has brought us towards really truly working too, because there were so many issues going on at home, and it was because I was so strong-willed and because I was aggressive and hard-headed and stubborn, and so much more like my father than I would ever like to think. And so we would just butt heads, and we would both say things that we didn't mean, but I was 12 or 13 and he was an adult. And so when he said those things to me, it impacted me in a different way than my malicious words impacted him.
Totally.
And there was a point where I felt like no one loved me. No one would ever love me. And it wouldn't matter if I just was gone. Like, it would be easier on my parents. I wouldn't have to deal with, and that was like the time when people were starting to date. Like, I wouldn't have to deal with finding a boyfriend because I didn't think I could find one, because I didn't feel girly enough to have one. Or, I wasn't the cool kid, but I was an athlete. So I felt like I should have been a cool kid. And I wasn't, because I was into like books and nerdy stuff. And I loved like Pokemon, and I didn't tell anybody. I never told anybody any of like my weird nerdy stuff because I felt like I was an athlete. I was supposed to be cool. And so I had this huge identity problem. And that was where my suicidal thoughts came into play, because I didn't know who I was. So why did it matter if I was here?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, man, I feel like I'm speaking to myself and talking to you. That's totally my experience. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I was very much into like the things the boys were into. And it was very lonely and it was very hard. And again, like, it's like suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And thinking those thoughts, for me, my experience and my experience, a lot of clients I work with, is it's just a way to end the pain. And so again, like if emotional intelligence and like they never talked about depression or anxiety in high school. And I was a severe alcoholic by the time I turned 14. No one talked about anxiety. No one talked about depression, and everyone was struggling with it. And so these things have to be, I mean, I have a son, and like, he is so emotionally intelligent because I make it a priority that feelings, and I know you watch my Instagram Live, so you know that I'm so obsessed with developing healthy relationship with emotions and thoughts and behaviors and our spirituality, because that's who we are. That's who we are in our core. We're emotional beings from the time we're born to the time we die. But no, a lot of people don't know how to be with their emotions or the negative thoughts, or so they self-destruct. And then they find ways to just check out of the pain. And if someone at that time in my life, in my high school, not one person did this, came up to me and just said, "Are you okay?" Why did they not do that? Because they couldn't see the signs. And I also wore a mask that was so brilliantly designed to pretend, and you wouldn't know anything was wrong with me.
Yeah. I think I wore a little bit less of a mask. I mean, I went full on like punk scene kid. I dyed my hair pink as a
Wow.
anti pink expression of like, I can have pink hair and not be feminine and be a bad. Like I totally took it I took pink the opposite way. I did not accept pink, but I like wore it as almost like a statement.
Totally.
And I started hanging out with different kids, and still no one asked me if I was okay. And I was like, I'm being pretty obvious about it. I feel like everybody kind of knows I'm not okay. And I think as a parent, it's really hard to accept when your child is struggling and you know that you've played some kind of role in it. Especially, and we've had those conversations. So I know that it was hard for them to accept, and they didn't want to see anything was wrong. So they didn't. But then I've also spoken to, my uncles. I mean, I had my two main influences in my life were my grandma and grandpa. And my grandma passed away when I was a freshman in high school, which is what led to the pink hair and a lot of that negativity that was happening. And then and my grandpa just passed away this year. Mm-hmm. And so after my grandpa passed away, my uncles kind of sat down with me and they're like, okay, like, are you going to be okay? Like your comfort people aren't here. And we want you to know we're going to be those people for you. And we're going to be here for you. And they were like, we knew you weren't okay, but we didn't feel like it was our place. And I was like, it probably wasn't. And I had, and my grandparents kind of stepped in and made it their place a little bit, but they're like, we want you to know you have a safe place and you can come to us. And because I'm still working through all of those things, it's as recent as 4 years ago. It's as recent as yesterday in a way. And they were like, we knew, like everybody knew you weren't okay. And I was like, good. I'm glad everybody knew. Why did no one ask me? Like,
no. And it's because it's vulnerable and we're not like, vulnerability is the scariest place for someone to be in. And I understand, this culture is it's so frustrating to me. Listen, I'm not a therapist, but I'm kind of trained like a therapist. And often people think I'm a therapist. I work very kind of therapeutically. It's just kind of my orientation. I was raised by a therapist and I work with a lot of licensed clinicians. And so I've just been obsessed with this world. I've done a lot of studying in a lot of different areas and taken a lot of courses and stuff. So one of the things I'm very passionate about is generational trauma and helping parents and families understand how they have contributed to impacting their children. But the problem is we live in a culture that shames people and villainizes people for making mistakes or not being perfect. And there's so much pressure to be perfect that if you're not the perfect parent and you did cause harm to your kid, you don't want to admit it because you're going to be shamed. And you're going to, and that's not how we heal. We heal by people. And it doesn't mean that parents don't do shitty things to their kids. That's not what I'm saying. But I think parents would be more willing to take responsibility if they weren't going to be shamed. If they weren't going to be so, like a lot of the people I do a lot of work with come from very difficult backgrounds, have been to prison, grew up in gangs, have participated in a lot of behavior that's, a lot of crime, and they've done a lot of really terrible, scary things. I can't go into those sessions looking at those people as bad people. I have to go in there looking at like, where's their pain? What in them caused them to behave and act out in this way where they're causing harm to other people? And actually, oh my God, you probably love this. I led a group last week. I'm so passionate about the subject of bullying because honestly, my dad plays like one of the biggest bullies ever, right? And so I was talking to him about this because I led this group and we were talking about bullying because obviously people ask him a lot of questions about bullying. And the whole group was a group of like, and again, this is at like an outpatient facility. So a lot of the people, their trauma manifested into substance abuse. And the whole group was a group of like 12 people. 10 of them were men, 2 of them were females. by the end, the whole group was about bullying. And these are guys that have been in prison, gangs, I mean, rough lifestyles. All of them at their core said, I was bullied. I was scared to be vulnerable. That's it. That's at the core.
Yeah.
It's at the core of all the pain. I have pain. I'm scared to be vulnerable because shit's happened to me that didn't allow me to be vulnerable because I was hurt in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you spoke a little bit about your dad. That was kind of uncovered in the last season of Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
What's so nice about this show is kind of getting to see the why to a lot of the questions that you had when you watched the original movies. Like, why is John Kreese like this? Why is Johnny Lawrence like this? And we've gotten a lot of those answers, which has been really good for a lot of people. But you see that at the core, like your dad's character, Kreese, like he had a lot of trauma. He was bullied. He had a lot of issues with his mom and her, taking her own life. And so there were a lot of issues that led him to being the person that he was. And so you're kind of forced to feel bad for him a little bit, because at our core, we all have those, similar issues, whether they're the same or not. Most likely they're not exactly the same, but everybody has something that causes them to do whatever they choose to do with their life. But then we also get a line in the show that it's like, everybody has a past and it doesn't give you the right to be a bully, which I thought was a fantastic addition to the season, seeing everything that happened with Kreese.
That's right. And I actually talked about that in the group, as and you get to see that he was bullied and that he was not born. I don't believe people are born evil. Listen, I've had a child. When you have a baby and you look into a baby's eyes, like that baby's not born evil. Yeah, they have like predispositions and genetics and shit, but I'm sure that contributes in some way to certain people's behaviors. I think everything is about nature and nurture and the family environment that you grow up in. And almost all of these kids, they're not kids, they're full-grown adults, but were bullied in their childhood in some way, whether it was abuse from their parents or they were bullied by people in school. I mean, I had this young woman in the group, and she was so severely bullied, cyberbullied in middle school, that she started self-harming. Because I asked her, I said, what did you do? My question to her was, what did you do with that pain that you were left with? And she said, I took it out on myself. And bullying is just a way for people to deal with their pain, because if harm is being done to you, if pain is being done to you, one feels such a state of powerlessness and helplessness. And then they're left with all of those emotions, and they feel such a lack of control that they unconsciously go put themselves in a place of control by taking out the pain on someone else. And again, it's not to say that it's okay, because it's absolutely not.
No.
But if we look at it that way, I think it brings more compassion into the room, because all of these guys that, again, have caused a lot of harm to other people, they're like, there's this one guy that I work with. He's in his 40s. He's had a really tough life with drugs, in prison a lot. He's sobbing at the shame of the things he's done. But so many people are not given the chance to see that they're not bad people. They might have done bad things. But it's about teaching people that anger is normal. It's normal to have anger. You're always justified in your anger. You're not always justified in how you deal with that anger.
Yeah, I agree. I did that. I didn't want to take it out on myself, because for whatever reason, and whether that be my strong-willedness, my whatever it was, I knew that that's not how I was going to handle it. But I didn't know what to do with all that pain. I didn't know where to put it. And I was taking karate, and I used bullying and violence and a little bit of aggression as a way to take it out on other people, whether that be my own brother and sister, my siblings, or, my friends. I cut a lot of people off. I made a lot of people feel really bad. And then through that same karate and through my instructors and the people that were around me, I kind of took a step back and I was like, oh no, that was the wrong way to do it. That was not the way to release that anger I was feeling. I was right in not harming myself, but I shouldn't be harming other people either. I should be dealing with it. And I say this all the time. That's why they're the one character in the show, Hawk or Eli, is my personal favorite character, because I
love his character.
So much of myself in him, and what he's portraying to me is so realistic, because I did that. I put up a front. I was a bully on the outside, but I was a bullying victim on the inside, and I just didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with that pain. And so a lot of people criticize his character, and I'm like, no, it actually, what he did at his age, I did that too. It makes a lot of sense. I completely understand why he did it. And then he realized he was wrong, and he took a step back. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I love his character too. And he's such a phenomenal actor. And I love the show listen, like, I know my dad's on the show, and so like my opinion could be formed because of that, but I'm honestly, acting is one of my other favorite things to do in the world. And I'm actually a very hard critic when it comes to acting. I went to acting school. And so I love film and I love all that stuff. So I can be I can form an opinion that's that's real on my own. And I think this show is so brilliantly written because it covers so many different things. It shows him as the bully now, then it is a flashback of when he was bullied. So it's like showing the transformation, and it's showing the evolution of how people get to where they are today. People don't just wake up a bully. It's happened over time. And the fucked up thing in our culture is we then villainize bullies. So bullies never get the chance to actually change. And I love that you were able to kind of acknowledge, like, I've been that person before. We can all be that way. I've totally been a bully to people in my life. We all have different parts of ourselves. And we need to stop shaming everyone. Because if we just demonize people and villainize them and call them bad, we can't change. Like, people don't get the opportunity to change. They're just stuck in their pain, and then they're stuck in just acting it out and causing more destruction. And then we have the fucking world that we live in where there's shootings. I mean, it's not the people that go and do shootings are the people that are being bullied. It's not the bullies. They don't feel like and again, it's not excusing. It's absolutely horrific. But there needs to be more attention to this in schools, in home life. People need to start having the uncomfortable conversations with their kids. Parents need to start taking responsibility and looking at what are the symptoms that maybe they're missing. All it is I need to connect with my kid. And if I don't know how to connect with my kid, there's something going on with me. And you might be avoiding connecting with your kid by becoming a workaholic, by becoming super high functioning. There's so many clients that I worked with that said that their parents were very successful lawyers or CEOs of businesses, and they came home and they never said hi to them. They just ignored their kids. And it's not that they were bad, but they lived in the role of providing for their family and becoming super successful parents, that they thought that's all their kids needed. And really, the basic needs is not enough. Your kids have emotional needs. And for teachers in schools, your students have emotional needs that need to be attended to.
Yeah. I also think in our society too, we're always looking for someone else to blame.
Totally, because taking responsibility is hard. Listen, the work that I preach is not easy work, but man, it is so empowering when you do it, when you take responsibility, ability to respond, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's so freedom in that, because you don't have to walk around in the world afraid of who you are anymore. You can just be who you are and not be running from who you are, which is what I was doing for so long.
Yeah. And again, it just a testament to the writing of Cobra Kai. They do such a good job of addressing all of these things. I mean, well, First of all, on a lighter note, I love that your brother appeared as the bully.
I know, it's
because
so good.
everyone was thrown for a loop. I mean, I'm sure you knew that it was coming, but it was just, I mean, I was sitting there, I was like, oh, that's him. He even looks like him.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was such a cool experience to see him play that character. And I think he did such a phenomenal job. And it's so funny because he plays the bully and then my dad plays the bully, and they're both like the sweetest, funniest humans on the planet. And it's again, like the topic of bullying is very important in our family. And my dad has done a lot of like anti-bully, like he'll go to schools and talk about like anti-bullying and stuff like that. So, you know, it's actually something I want to do on my Instagram Live, is get them both on there and just bring up that subject, because I think it really, again, not from the subject of putting bullies down, but more, how do we solve it? It's literally what I was talking to my dad about the other day. We solve it, I think, by bringing compassion and understanding into the mix. And again, this doesn't mean I'm saying, oh, it's so okay what you're doing. It's no, let me understand why it's getting to that point where you feel the need to bully.
Yeah. Conversation and just like kind of acceptance that everybody makes mistakes and everybody has their own issues that they're battling, to start having that conversation, which I think is another key issue that the show addresses, is that no one knows how to communicate with each other. I think would open up a lot of avenues to solving problems with bullying, to solving problems with self-identity and issues that kids are facing that are causing them to do things like consider suicide.
Yeah, I mean, communication is, I tell my 3-year-old that communication, we do belief systems, like when he stays every night, when he stays here on the way to school, we do belief systems. And one of the things I tell him is that communication and vulnerability are your superpowers. My kid is so incredible at communicating. It's so beautiful to see, because a lot of adults suck at communicating, and communication truly is how we resolve things. But most people don't know how to communicate. And, you know, Shane Coyle, that I do the Instagram Live with, if you don't know him, go check out his Instagram. It's at Shane Coyle, oh shit, did I say it wrong? At Shane Coyle Healing. Yeah. But one of his things is start a new language, starting a new dialogue, like bringing a new dialogue onto the table, letting communication be something that should be worked on, like seeing that I like to say communication is sexy. Like if you can learn how to communicate, it becomes this sexy thing. Like, let me learn how to really hear you. Let me learn how to really communicate my needs. Let me feel seen. Let me feel understood. Because that's at the root of all of people's pain. It's not feeling seen, not feeling heard, and not feeling understood. So if I can learn how to communicate where I feel seen, understood, and heard, and you can feel seen, understood, and heard, so much is going to be resolved.
Yeah. And correct me if you think I'm wrong, because you obviously are the more knowledgeable about this. But for me, I think that the first step would be learning to listen, because I like to lead by example. And so if I show the person I'm communicating with that I can listen to them and understand and process their feelings and move forward with that from there, then maybe they'll do the same for me.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I run a lot of workshops and groups and coach a lot of people on communication, and active listening is one of the biggest things that I teach. It's action towards listening with your ears. And it's really, my thing is teaching people how to listen to understand rather than listen to make them wrong, rather than listen to make you right, rather than listening and waiting till they stop talking so that you can talk, but really listening to with your heart, with empathy. I call it empathic awareness from this book I read. They call it empathic awareness. It's the ability to put yourself in their shoes and really understanding they are having a completely different, separate experience than you. They come from a completely different childhood. They come from a completely different set of parents. They come from a completely separate brain. They're not going to have the same experience as you. But with communication, you can understand the experience and build the connection. And that's how we build intimacy with each other, is through connection. Into me, I see, into me, you see. And then that's how we feel loved and accepted and seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was, as a kid, I felt like I was very observant, and I tried to be and learn how to be very self-aware. And so something you just said actually ticked in my brain. Like, my dad and I, and a lot of the reasons that we kept fighting, and we thought we were getting better at communicating because we were learning to listen to each other.
Yeah.
We were listening to prove the other person wrong.
Oh man.
We're listening to manipulate, because we were going to take those words and then throw them back in each other's faces as like, hey, I heard exactly what you said, and it means this. And I still do that sometimes, and I try to catch myself when I do it. Now
Everyone does it. Totally.
You absolutely, like, it was a point that struck in my head. I was like, I 100% did that, and so did he, and that was the root of so many continued arguments, because we would just keep listening to each other, and we would keep going back and forth.
Totally. And you're not alone. That's been me. That's been most people, is people trying to be right. And I tell people, like, if you go in trying to be right, you're already wrong. Like, if you're going into an argument trying to win, you're already losing. You're not going to resolve any conflict with your husband, your wife, your son, your child, your sister, your boss, if you're just trying to be right all the time. That's just your ego leading the conversation, and that's not going to help resolve anything. And here's the thing. My whole thing is, we have a nervous system that is designed to keep you safe. If that nervous system feels threatened in any way, the self-defense mechanisms are going to get activated. Your amygdala, which is responsible for sensing danger, is going to get activated, and you're literally going to, in a sense, leave the room, and all your self-defense mechanisms are going to be leading the conversation. So you're going to get defensive. You're going to yell. You're going to call out all their, you're going to be mean to them. You're going to put them down. You're going to start people pleasing. You're going to not become authentic so that you can protect yourself. And then it's just two people yelling, and they're not hearing or listening at all.
Yeah. I think this is honestly, this is a really great conversation that we're able to have. And to anybody who watches the show, I think as we continue to have this conversation, they're going to see so many points that we're talking about come to life on screen. And it's very realistic to life. Like, these are real problems that everybody has. So when you're, looking at these characters and analyzing them, like, I think this is very helpful in that, but it's also an important conversation to be having here in the real world. And that's why I wanted to have you on here, because I think that's what the show is doing, is asking us to have these conversations.
Yeah, it is. And it's so, like, people are hurting and need to feel safe. I didn't feel safe in school to just go up to someone and say, hey, I'm hurting and I need attention. If I could have just said that and felt like someone actually cared in my school, I don't think I would have dealt with things in the way that I had dealt with for 2 or 3 years. By the time I was 16, I was in a residential treatment center for alcoholism. So that is what people need to be paying attention to, is how may someone be hurting right now? How are they, people say this line all the time, drives me crazy. Like, oh, she's just doing that for attention. He's just doing that for attention. And maybe they need attention, and maybe this is the only way that they get it. So what needs attention in them? They need someone to pay attention to them. They feel ignored. They don't feel seen. They feel made fun of. They feel like they're not good enough. They feel like they're unlovable. So we need to show that person that they're lovable, that they deserve attention, that there's no shame in having attention. If a baby was left with no attention, that baby would die. We are born to need connection. We are born to need attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just spoke a few days ago to Erin Bradley Danger, who plays Counselor Blatt on the show. And we were talking about the fact that a lot of times in the school systems, they're the people that are supposed to be there to notice those things and to sit down with you and like your guidance counselors. In my high school, there just weren't enough. and because we had such a large high school, but there are a lot of issues in the schooling system with guidance counselors and getting that help, and because you're kind of forced to seek it out on your own, and a lot of times kids aren't willing to do that.
Well, again, I think, listen, we talk about COVID being an epidemic. Shame is an absolute epidemic in this culture. And I think if I look back at my life and I just looking at all the clients I've worked with, it felt shameful to go. I think a lot of kids feel like it's shameful to go to a guidance counselor.
You don't even want to be seen walking into the office.
No, because you're taught that there's something wrong with you. You're taught that if you need therapy, something's bad. Everyone needs therapy. Everyone needs someone to talk to. Life is a fucking shit show. Everyone needs a safe space to just process and understand what's going on and what's causing you, pain right now. I think that if kids, and I hate the word kids, like people, adolescents, people in high school, I think one of the solutions could be peers normalizing it in groups, right? If someone came up to me in high school and was like, hey, Rachel, I just started this group on depression and anxiety. I love it. It's helped me so much. I've been dealing with it for so long. Do you want to come? I'd be like, oh my God. Oh, hallelujah. Like I would feel so normal, right? And that the thing is, when you get into high school, you, like you said earlier, you're in puberty, your hormones are changing. You just feel insecure, right? But no one talks about it. So then you think you're the only one that feels insecure. So if people started normalizing insecurities, that we have solutions for that, to work it through, that anxiety and depression, they happen in life. This is how we work through it. Oh my God, I think it would be so different. It's not to say that guidance counselors aren't effective, because they are, and everyone has their place. But I think part of the solution is kids, students consciously waking up to the human experience. That human experience is emotional, it's terrifying, it's exciting. You're going to have a lot of fears. You're going to feel weird sometimes. And this is how we get through it.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a tangent or not, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's okay. Yeah. But something that I think music taught me was that it's okay not to be okay. And as much as I regret maybe some of the choices I made with the friend group that I decided to have as I was going through a lot of those struggles, one that I don't regret is starting to listen to what would be considered punk and alternative music, where a lot of times the message was, life's fucked up. It's okay not to be okay. And there was a lot of healing in that.
Oh my God, absolutely. Like I identify with real things, with real human emotions, with people telling me it's okay not to be okay. Totally 100%. I did an article recently, and the article, what do you call that? Headline? I don't know what you call it. The title of the article is "Life is Messy, Deal with It."
Yeah. Yeah.
And if people can just accept that, if we can stop living in this world that tells us to be perfect, and stop shooting for perfection, and start aiming towards life is messy. How do I deal with the mess? How can I be okay in the mess? How can I love my imperfect self? How can I be okay being imperfect and completely loving my imperfections? We would have a totally different world. We just would, because we wouldn't be shaming imperfections. And to shame imperfection is to shame humanity, because what makes humans so beautiful is how messy life would be so boring if everything was perfect all the time. It would be. And I think that's why a lot of people, they end up self-destructing when they have a monotonous job and they have like it just, everything kind of feels bland, because people need diversity. People need, like, human beings are not black and white. Everyone is so complex.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree. There's nothing really else for me to say. I feel like other than to just kind of move on, because I can't say it any better. But the last thing that I wanted to ask you about in relation to the show is they actually opened up, kind of a conversation about PTSD and Sam's struggle with that. So my question would be if you could give her kind of one piece of advice moving forward with her struggles with that, because I don't want to dive into all of the nitty gritty of it. We don't have time for that. But just if you could give her some advice.
Oh man. Well, PTSD is something I'm very familiar with. And I mean, again, I think when people think of PTSD, they often think of veterans with PTSD, which is, and there's different levels, but there's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So if you really kind of break that down, like if I said everyone has trauma, and if I said that one of the definitions of trauma is overwhelming stress on the body, and PTSD is post-traumatic stress, right? And you remove the disorder part, right? Everyone has that. And they're dealing with it in their own ways. They just might not be knowing it consciously. So I think the first piece of advice I would tell her is like, it's okay to start talking about this. It's okay. Like you said, it's okay not to be okay. I would validate her feelings and I would say, man, you've gone through a lot. And it's okay to feel like you've gone through a lot. And I'm here to support you and I'm here to be there for you. And, I think there's interesting things about like the Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do. And it's like, there's so much beauty in both worlds, right? Because, what I learn a lot from like the Cobra Kai world is like fighting, like fight for what you want, fight for your goals, fight for yourself, and in going to therapy or seeking out help, that's you fighting for your yourself. If working with a coach, working with your sensei, that's you fighting for yourself. And so I think I would tell her like, getting help does not make you weak. Oh my God, I have to talk about that because it is so brought up in my groups all the time. And it is not weak to need help. It is not weak to cry. It is not weak to be vulnerable. And so many men, specifically men, struggle with this idea that if I'm vulnerable, I'm weak. And a lot of women struggle with this too, but in a different way. But it is not weak to need help. It makes you more powerful to own when you need help. It makes you more powerful to know that you've gone through a lot. And because I've gone through a lot, I need help sometimes. Yeah. I hope that answered it. I know I go off in so many different ways.
No, you completely answered it. And I hope the big three are listening because they could use some of that in the coming season with a lot of the characters, just getting help. I said season 4 should just be one big therapy session. Like everybody just needs to talk it out. We all need to. I think everyone in the world just needs to have a big therapy session. I think it's, I love that show. And I love the messages. It's honestly such a spiritual show. Like there's just so much going on, mind, body, spirit, and the connectivity of all of that. And I think that's why this show has become so successful, is because people's souls are craving this right now. It's like we came from a year of being in COVID. We're still in it, but people are needing this like motivation that a lot of people have lost so much in this last year. I did an interview and this guy asked me, how do I forgot exactly word for word, but he had basically lost his business in COVID. And he felt like he lost his drive to like, in a sense, want to live and keep going. And he didn't know how to keep going. And I think like the message of Cobra Kai, part of the message is like, fight for yourself. Like I said, like life is going to fucking kick you in the ass, but get back up. Like you can always get back up. It's a choice to get back up. Life is suffering, the Buddha says. Now what? Like you're going to get in pain. Now what? Right? Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful way of showing people that it's okay to have stuff that you're going through. Yeah. And I think to perfectly put the yang to the yin is that Miyagi-Do then addresses balance and being in harmony with yourself and the spirituality of all of it. So
Oh,
I think that it does create this perfect balance of everything that you need to know in order to survive being a human. But you brought up COVID, so I'm going to get to that question that we kind of teased earlier, and I want to know for you personally what the best thing to come out of the pandemic and the whole experience has been.
For me, I've actually wrote a song about this. I'm still writing a song about it. I've seen my resilience and my strength, and I know to the deepest part of my core and my being how strong I am now and how resilient I am. Whereas before it was kind of this like intellectual, yeah, I know I'm strong. Now it's like an experience of strength. And also, I think too, one of the best things that have happened to me this last year, I have become so much more comfortable in the unknown. And I think that's what has been the scariest thing thus far with people with COVID is we've just all been in the unknown. We've never faced this before. And the unknown is the most terrifying place for the nervous system to be in. So it's thrown so many people, into a place of chaos within themselves. So I'm really proud of myself for how I've worked with being scared. And I'm proud of myself for how I've worked through being in the unknown. And, you were talking about balance with Miyagi-Do. That is life. Like you have to learn how to have balance in your life. You have to learn how to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, you're just not going to have a happy life. It's like a 3-legged chair. If one of the legs on the chair is not there, the chair is going to fall. You're going to fall in some way in your life. So I think people need to shift being so work obsessed to let me be obsessed with taking care of myself.
Yeah. I love that answer. And I've definitely done a lot of self-reflection, but I think I've already said that answer. So I think my answer for today, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is going to be not only did I myself take a personal journey, but my family is going through a journey of growth and forcing ourselves to really look at the problems and the cracks in the foundation of our family and trying to heal from the base and move forward. So at 21, like I can now sit here and say like, I'm moving towards a better relationship with my father, with my mother, and we're working on those things. And I think we acknowledge that we're working on them and that it's not going to be perfect right now, but things are finally getting better. Whereas for a while I was, I was away at college and I was back and I felt like it had kind of plateaued where we weren't, things were okay and we had addressed some of the issues, but we weren't doing anything to grow. Mm-hmm. And so now, forced to be all under the same roof, we've taken a lot of those steps. So I'm very proud of how it's gone and how we've handled things so far.
Oh, that's awesome. And I feel so excited for you and your family because that is truly how we change things. And it is hard to look at oneself, but that's so awesome that you and your family have been able to work towards that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Before we head out, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of tell us where to find you, where to follow you, and some of the things that you're working on.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at Rachel Kove. One of the things I'm working on that I'm really, really passionate and mentioned this earlier is the WTF is this human experience. Right now it's every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Instagram live with Shane Coyle. And then we're starting a podcast and we're going to be doing Clubhouse, but we're really, maybe I'd love to have you on there. That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
I would love that.
Yeah, just really, our whole thing is about teaching people how to become introspective so that they can learn a new perspective, because in learning a new perspective, like you can change your whole life in any area. Like awareness is the key to change. So we're obsessed with that, very passionate about that. And, just really getting a lot of people on there to just kind of break down like what the fuck is this human experience? Cause it's such a weird journey. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure it out. So that's what we're doing. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, awesome. And before we wrap up, I want to, anybody who's watching this, as well as I want you to see this, the shirt that I've been wearing this whole time was designed by a friend of mine, a peer that I have developed through networking. Her name is Jenny Fisher. She works with the NBA, and you've seen a lot of athletes probably wearing these shirts. She's been, giving them out, but if you purchase one of these Keep Showing Up shirts, all that money will go towards suicide prevention and awareness. And I think what she's doing is so incredible, and that she's just kind of pointing everybody in the direction of talking about these things and wearing it right on your chest. Like, we all have to show up for ourselves every day.
God, I love that. It's the first thing I noticed when I came on here was that shirt. And I think that is literally half the battle in life, is to just keep showing up. Just keep showing up, people.
Yeah. I mean, I'm honored to even have gotten to work with Jenny and get to know her a little bit, because I think the message that she's spreading is so powerful, and a lot of the athletes are getting to see it, but I want everybody to see it. And I want, now I'm doing something that kind of works with pop culture in a TV show. And so there's a new demographic of people who can kind of get to see the work she's doing. And I'm going to have all of your information linked in the description, but I'm also going to have the link to Jenny's Twitter page where you can go and purchase these shirts. So
well, I think you're so fantastic. I feel like people are so lucky to listen to you. You're such an inspiring young woman, and I think you're going to help a lot of people. You're so raw and real and vulnerable, and I think that's what changes a culture. So thank you so much for having me on here, and I had such a wonderful conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I enjoyed this conversation, and although you're not a member of the show, I think that this was an absolutely important conversation to have. And I'm hopeful that people in this fandom, in this community, can see it and start to work towards all the things that you, your dad, your brother are really promoting. So
yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's an honor. I appreciate it.